What happens when sunlight becomes more than energy? When it becomes a guide for living? Darren Hickman grew up surrounded by artists and independents, channeling that spirit into advertising, organic skincare, and renewable tech. His story is about clarity, curiosity, and creating with light itself. This is Darren Hickman on My Most Authentic Life.
Thank you very much, Fede. It's a pleasure.
Now, to kick things off, I'd love to talk about something that I rarely get to talk about on a personal growth podcast about personal journeys and transformation, and that is the subject of sunlight and the power, the immense power of sunlight. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's been my obsession for over 10 years. And what many people don't know is that actually sunlight in 1 hour can power the world's energy needs for a year. If we could only capture that energy and transfer it, we would have a fossil fuel negative energy source.
I know it's so interesting. It's something that we see every day, but yet we don't get to really absorb, no pun intended, the power of it because it affects everything, right?
Yeah, it does. And actually, I'm sure everyone has heard about the extinction of species, the extinction of dinosaurs. And of course, that was caused by supposedly volcanic activity. But what actually led to the extinction? The extinction was actually caused by the clouds created by volcanoes blocking out the sun. And the sun caused plant life to die off. And therefore, all the species in the world who were dependent on that food chain ended up dying off.
I love that. That shows you the extraordinary power of sunlight. And now, like I said off the top, you've said before that 1 hour of sunlight could power the world's needs for an entire year. That's crazy.
Oh, it really is. And I think that technology has advanced to a point where there are solar panels available. And now there are solar roofing tiles that are being developed. It's expensive, but as with any new technology, it takes a while to reach a point of critical mass so that the pricing can come down so that it's easily adopted by the masses. But it's moving in that direction. And I think that a lot of people are familiar with, solar energy, wind energy, even in oceans, they now have turbines that can use water flow to create alternative energy. But the real power is in sunlight.
Yeah, it's extraordinary when we really start to think about something that's been above us, literally, this whole time. But any authentic journey really comes back to that moment, that wake-up call, that pivot, when we realize something so powerful. Can you take us back to that moment when sunlight becomes, for you, more than a theory and turns into something more personal that's going to guide your life mission?
Sure, yeah. So when I started working with something sunlight related, it was actually in college. And I was working with Pioneer Seed Corn Company, and I was contracting with them to work with their hybrid seed division. And I began to become familiar with, the power of sunlight and how it actually ends up feeding the world. And then I moved into marketing advertising, where I started to become familiar with strategy and creativity and how you combine ideas and how you actually kind of push yourself to do something different. I got into organic skincare, and skincare is very close to a relationship with sunlight, because another thing that most people don't know is 80% of skin aging is related to sun exposure, right? And so that's why increasingly people are using sunscreens and sun lotions, because in 15 minutes, your skin can be burned by the power of sun. And then I started to think about and this is where I get to the kind of obsession phase. What is it about sunlight that interacts with biological organisms that causes such a dramatic effect? And it is actually the fact that sunlight can split hydrogen and oxygen. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound much like skincare. But actually, of course, because most of our body is made up with water, what ends up happening when the sun contacts your skin, it splits the oxygen from hydrogen, creates free radicals, and that damages cells. And then I realized, wow, damages cells. Bacteria are cells. So then I became really obsessed with figuring out how we can control this process and make it accessible to people to control bacteria instead of using chemicals. That was the point of obsession.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned a key word there, accessible. So one of the struggles that you start facing is having made this discovery and then trying to communicate that to people so that they jump on board with your mission. Tell us about that part of your journey.
Accessibility is psychological and functional. From a psychological point of view, people need to accept the concept, which is tough when you're talking about creating a product that is unplugged and you can just drop it in and it goes to work killing bacteria, right? Psychologically, that's not an accessible concept. So that was a challenge, right? To get people to accept this idea of a new technology, right? The functional accessibility is actually creating some product at a price point and at in a versatile format that is practical for people to incorporate into their lives. People are naturally creatures of routine, and we tend to do the things that we're comfortable with, that we know work, etc. So that's all part of this challenge of breaking through people's routines, psychologically, functionally, creating accessibility.
And what's interesting about your story, because some of our journeys are anchored around that pivot where you make that discovery, which you've spoken to, others are then move into that the struggle component of our plan of our vocation. But your struggle seems to be intertwined with obsession, and how does obsession continue to weave through your entire story, really, and your everyday life?
I think that it's based on kind of a cliche, which is find something you're passionate about, right? And what some people find creating passion is not what someone else will find creating passion. My extended family, they're all farmers. They're in the agricultural business. And so I was surrounded by that. And then I got into my Pioneer seed corn. And then I got into organic skincare. And I was a member of the Green Spawn Network's board of directors. And I started to learn about sustainability and the threats to the environment. And I really cared about those things. So when I came across this concept of something that could potentially make a real impact in the world, that was passion for me. And I've stuck with it. There have been highs, there have been lows, there have been years, there have been failures. But if you have something that you're passionate about, you become obsessed with it. And your obsession remains. Your passion may not if you give up, but the obsession will always be there. So luckily, I've maintained both my passion and my obsession.
Well, you have a great quote. Not sure if I'm remembering properly. Obsession is immune to not giving up. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Again, luckily, I'm making progress with my obsession, and it is driving me to get beyond my comfort zone. Again, my routines have been shattered. My previous life routines are shattered because of my obsession. But I wake up every day feeling like I am making progress and I am going to make a real contribution.
Well, can you speak to that a little bit more and the impact it's had on your family and your relationships when they have a madman in the house?
Yeah, well, that's often the way I'm seen. Yeah, I I actually had parents that were artists, and then they realized that there's not much money to be made in fine art, so they got into commercial art and advertising, and set up businesses. Right. So I saw from a very young age that uh, to create a business requires sacrifice. Right. And of course, I was left to eat my TV dinners more than once. But I was okay with that. Finally I moved on to fresh fruits and vegetables. But to fast forward, it was in my blood, I think, from a very young age. Have a business, be independent, call your own shots, reap the rewards, but of course you have to pay the price in some ways. And my friends have suffered because they get unanswered phone calls for weeks on end. My sons, of course, would like for me to, be outside throwing the baseball with them much more often. I do it as much as I can. I've created a great relationship with them, but now I think they have the bug because they're both in university and studying business, entrepreneurship, and innovation. So I must have done something right, or maybe done not too many things wrong.
Well, there you go. There you go. It sounds like you've inspired their own journeys as well. So that's one component of the struggle, the ones that are closer to home, right? But then there's the external ones. You've said that this path wasn't easy because really the physics that you discovered was really really unbelievable, right? And then the product that we're going to talk about a lot more later, but that challenges an entire industry. So, what did those early years look like? Those are the years that really no one really sees.
Yeah. So, like most people, I took biology, I took chemistry in high school and in university. Um, I didn't take physics, but at the time I thought, okay, this is just something I must do to get my degree, and I wasn't passionate about it because there wasn't really a point, right? You're thinking theory, but at the point I learned that there could be a connection between these that would have a practical application. That's when I became really obsessed with the physics, the chemistry, the biology. And actually, my product is a combination of all three, right? There's first the physics part. How do you capture sun's energy? How do you capture that? And then the chemistry is, then what does that do? And can you capture enough of it to create that chemical reaction, which is creating free radicals by splitting hydrogen from oxygen? And then there is, okay, you've got this stuff floating around. Then what's the impact on biological organisms? And that's where the biology comes in. So I, at the very beginning, became obsessed with teaching myself. And what a lot of people don't know is that there's a lot of people out there that are self-taught, right? So even someone that has a master's in physics, that is just a fraction of the education they're receiving through their lifetime. It's a lot of hard work, self-teaching, and again, combining concepts. So everything that I have created exists online, but what I've been able to do is combine them and create a product which works.
Now, what was the hardest part on this journey for you? Was it the disbelief from others or the internal pressure to keep going?
The internal pressure actually wasn't hard. It might have been foolish at times, but it wasn't. It wasn't hard. The
Delusion comes
internal
easy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The external pressure, I would say also, you know, once you're committed to something, the naysayer voices tend to fade away, and you start to ignore it. Um, and you have to again not believe in this theory of insanity is actually doing something over and over again and expecting a different result, because that's what entrepreneurs do. They have to test, they have to do, they have to test. And at some point, everyone is saying you're insane, right? But eventually you start to just accept, okay, well, then maybe I'm insane, but that's okay. I wake up happy every day. The biggest challenge actually was from the very beginning, when mechanically I had to figure out how to do this, right? And obviously, something that is so disruptive is going to be similar to creating the first microwave oven, creating the first telephone line, creating the first electrical wire, right? Those were incredibly disruptive. And all of those inventors met with huge problems in just developing it and then getting the public to try it out. So that's what I would say was my biggest hurdle, is developing and getting people just to try it and consider that maybe this works.
What was that moment like when people started to really get it?
It was amazing. It brought tears to my eyes, because I think, as many entrepreneurs will agree, it's a lonely road, especially in the beginning, right? People don't understand you. You're doing something different. You're not following the typical path. And once you get confirmation that that actually is working, it's a huge emotional moment in your life, personally as well as professionally, because being an entrepreneur is not a profession. It's a personal journey. Eventually, at some point, it's your profession, because you've laid the groundwork and everything kind of just operates on its own.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome that you were able to have that moment of catharsis, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I was just gonna add that, I was lucky, because when I was developing the technology behind Card Guard, I was still involved in skincare, and I was, involved in a product that was sold to professional outlets, so to spas, basically. Spas, day spas, resort spas, etcetera. So I had access to a lot of people that were, number one, concerned about sustainability, wellness, and also had pools, right? So I had a public that was not only curious, but they understood I wasn't a madman, and they were willing to try it. And one person in particular, who was a cancer survivor, and she loved being in her swimming pool. And she was concerned, though, whenever she sensed that chemical atmosphere in the pool. And she tried it, and she actually had a 90% reduction in the chlorine she was using. And it was like, swimming in fresh water. That was another moment that kind of brought tears to my eyes, because I realized that it has a human aspect, of course, right? It has an environmental aspect. And what better thing to create than one that benefits both?
Well, I love what you just shared there, because I was going to ask you this a bit later on, but really what you just mentioned there, that example speaks to the emotional impact, the feeling of your product, and the incredible payoff that this journey has taken you on. When do you discover the emotional drive, the emotional origin story for this next chapter in your life?
Yeah, my background actually seems discombobulated, agriculture, advertising, skincare, then solar powered pool product, right? But what I see and what I think most people experience is you can draw from everything. And what I learned in advertising, which is probably the most distant, is you need to work up to an emotional benefit. And it isn't just about consumers, it's about yourself, right? And I think most people, they go through their lives and they're just checking the boxes, right? And I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to. And what I think most people would benefit from is just taking a step back and thinking, what is the emotional benefit that I get out of this, right? And it recalibrates people's priorities, I think. And that's something that I've always done, is kept in mind what I am doing feeds my soul. It feeds my emotional needs. And even if I go days at a time doing technical things, I realize at the end of the day, this is all just feeding that overall uh, goal that I think most people would benefit from, which is at the end of the day, how do I want to feel?
Exactly, right? Yeah. How do you want to feel? And yeah, I like to talk about that a lot. That really, when you're building something new, it's not really about whatever that may be. In my case, it's not just an audio podcast, it's not a video podcast, it's not a brand, it's a feeling and it's an emotion.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think that was the inspiration for the movement that happened maybe 20 years ago around companies establishing missions and vision statements. It wasn't about their product, it was about what are we contributing via our product, right?
What's
And
the North Star? Yeah.
exactly. And I think that most entrepreneurs are driven by that mission, that vision. The best leaders are communicating that to their people and to their customers. And that's what I try and do also, is this isn't just a pool product. This is a stepping stone to leveraging the world's number one most powerful energy source for the betterment of humanity and the world.
That's so well put. So well put. And obviously, there's the raw power of emotion, but behind every emotion, there's also just like a cool idea as well. But when do you realize that this isn't just a cool idea, it's the idea?
Mm, yeah. Very early on, I knew this could be the idea because research into free radicals is just at the beginning. And people hear about immunotherapy. Immunotherapy is about antioxidation, leveraging the body's natural ability to heal itself. And free radicals, through my research, has confirmed that it actually stimulates a healthy response in organisms. When you're exposed 24/7, like bacteria is in water, it has a damaging effect. It has a damaging effect even in humans and in plants. But through evolution, organisms, humans, plants have developed an ability to respond to that and become healthier. And I know this sounds like a big pie in the sky idea, but it actually is key to the reason I was passionate from the beginning, because I saw early on that this wasn't just about pools. This wasn't just about treating water. This had the potential to be much bigger.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah, far bigger than myself, far bigger than the pools that I am treating. Although I
Ex-
love that. I love that.
yeah. 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 A lot bigger. A lot bigger. As powerful as sunlight.
It's powerful as sunlight, and it is everywhere and can be everywhere.
Yeah. I like that. Now, I wanted to touch back on obsession because obviously it's something that it's what's brought you here. And something I like to say often on here. and I think the conversations we have on the show really speak to that, is that at the end of the day, change is a loss calculation, right? When you go after something and want to create change, you have to decide, uh, what are you willing to lose? Who are you willing to lose? You know, what are you willing to let go of? And so I'm just wondering, what did obsession cost you? What has it cost you? What have you lost?
I have I I've lost having a consistent bank account. I I've I've lost a few Facebook friends. Uh, um,
Welcome to entrepreneurship.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I've lost having that um, a kind of standard view of stability in life, right? But maybe that's not who I was from the very beginning, right? Maybe I've always been a risk taker. It's not for everyone. You know, a lot of people would um, fall into severe depression if they have done what I have done. And I must say that at times I have almost picked up the phone and called a therapist. Okay, sorry. I have to be honest. I have picked up the phone and called a therapist.
You wouldn't have gotten this far without it.
No, no, no. We all need help, right? We all need help at times. Yeah. So that's what it's cost me, and it's hobbies, right? One of my therapists said, "Do you have hobbies?" And I very quickly said, "No, used to." Right? I don't anymore, because every waking moment, if I'm not taking care of, the people I love, if I'm not taking care of the basics in life, I'm actually taking care of Kardangar.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I love hearing your insight on that and that lived experience. Ultimately, this building path is about meaning, right? Because you wake up every day and something gives you meaning. It's not just about pools. It goes far deeper than that. What is that for you?
Um, there's also a common cliche about following your passion. And then recently, Mark Cuban came out and said, no, 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 that's all wrong. Don't follow your passion. Do what you're good at. And then eventually you can follow your passion. Luckily for me, I stumbled on something that I became good at, right? Because I was following my passion. And I think that's also the missing piece between those two theories is what if, and I think in today's age of the internet and now with AI, it's amazing what people can access. What if you can become good at something that you feel passionate about? And I think that's one of the big benefits that's coming our way is that people will be able to kind of split those two opposites and do something. And that's what I did. And I am fortunate to have been able to do that.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing that you've been able to turn an obsession into something so impactful. What's something that you know now that you didn't know at the beginning?
Oh, wow. Where do I begin? I know that uh, this concept of conceive, believe, achieve, again, maybe turned on its head, believe, achieve, or believe, conceive, achieve, it is very possible. I know that hard work can pay off. I know that the accessibility of information can do wonders for humanity, and I know that it's just the beginning, and that innovation is always possible. And my oldest son once said to me, "Everything's been invented. How do we get beyond where we are?" And I told him that's probably what people said 50 years ago, right? And we will not know what is possible until 20 years from now. And then we look back and say, oh, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. So there's always the chance to innovate. And now in this digital world, there's access to the knowledge to be able to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a great segue into my next question. You've reinvented yourself a few times. And like you just said, there's always an opportunity. It's always the right time to innovate, to reinvent. As we start to close off, what's on your mind? Is there something? I'd love to give you some space right now to share anything on your mind, any thoughts that maybe this conversation has sparked, or something that you would love to leave with the audience.
Take chances. Have no regrets. And that doesn't mean you have to empty your bank account. That doesn't mean you have to go in and tell your boss, sorry, I'm not coming in tomorrow. But push yourself. Think about what would give you personal energy and passion, and take some steps. See if maybe that's the road you can follow.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Darren. And that takes us into our rapid fire round. I always finish the show with the same 3 questions for every guest. The first one: what is the biggest gift that you've discovered about yourself on this journey?
Resilience. I think that most people doubt that they can do certain things, that they can perform a certain way, that they're attractive enough, that they're smart enough. I've learned that none of that matters at the end of the day. Those are all just, evil goblins sitting on your shoulder. And if you stick with what you're passionate about, you will develop resilience. And that's what I believe I have attained and achieved and continue to leverage.
We can do hard things and surprise ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
The next question: what's the hardest truth you've had to accept about yourself?
That I am very often, if not the majority of the time, too much of a lone wolf. I have a hard time accepting help. And that goes back to my childhood. I grew up in the countryside, and my parents were working, and so I had to just figure out how to do things for myself, beginning with how to make that TV dinner. And then, of course, once you get into an entrepreneurial setting, it feeds that, right? Because you have people around you saying, I'm not sure I want to spend any time doing that, right? And then you end up doing lots, if not most of the things by yourself. And so that's only fed what I believe is a bit of a flaw, right? And I've suffered the consequences. I haven't reached out to people, and it's delayed the development of things. But you know what? At the end of the day, I've kept marching forward, and I am working through that.
Beautiful. Amazing. Great answer. Thank you. And finally, what does authenticity mean to you?
Big word with lots of potential definitions and meanings. For me, authenticity means being honest, with humility and vulnerability, but transparency. Communicate the good, communicate the bad, but do it.
Beautiful. I love that answer. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of the show. Darren, thank you so much for being here today. So many great takeaways. But I'm going to remember 3 words: believe, conceive, achieve. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Fede. It's been an honor, and I've really enjoyed it.
That's today's origin story. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to share it with someone who could use a little inspiration. I'm Fede Vargas, and you can connect with me around the web at My Most Authentic Life.